Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go?
Hi, welcome to Parent University here at Monomoy Regional High School. My name is Cindy Horgan, and I am excited to be a part of this evening. And I am the Executive Director at the Cape Cod Children's Place. And I am with my friend and my colleague, Jacob Stapledon, who comes to us from
Children's Cove. We are the Child Advocacy Center for Cape Cod, Nantucket, and Martha's Vineyard. I am the Community Engagement and Education Program Manager over at Children's Cove. And we are thrilled to be here this evening to talk to you about a program that Cindy and I have been working on for quite some time, going throughout the community to raise awareness, provide education, and answer questions for parents.
We came together, Jacob and I have been really intersecting in our work for several years now, and came together and created a program called In the Interest of Every Child. And we decided at that point that we were going to design a program that really spoke to the different issues that are happening in families. And we are actually really lucky that we're getting to do that on our local Cape media. And so we've been able to come together and show different aspects of how families can be supported. So that is how we came together. The other part of what I do at Cape Cod Children's Place is we are the recipients of a state initiative through the Children's Trust for a program called SAFE, Child Communities. And SAFE stands for Stop Abuse for Every Child. And so it's that work there that has allowed me to really intersect with so many of the other agencies, because we recognize that it's a community that responds to this. And all of our work should be in the interest of every child and to stop abuse of every child. And so that's how we all come together. The guiding force around what happens at the Cape Cod Children's Place, as well as the Children's Cove, is the 5 protective factors that we always use as our lens in guiding us around what children and families need. And those 5 protective factors are concrete supports in times of need. So whether it be food or resources to help a family sort of keep it all together, creating resiliency in families and in parents, and helping them to create and develop their own resiliency to handle the curveballs that life will show them. Helping parents and caregivers to understand child development so that they have realistic expectations, as well as not only of their child but of themselves as they help them grow. And to also recognize the value of putting in place the social and emotional development of every child. So when children grow up with emotional intelligence, it's one of the key factors in setting them up for success in life. And the 5th protective factor is to create exactly what you're doing here tonight, social connections, community, because when we are a community, we are stronger.
Absolutely. And it's through that partnership that Cindy and I work very closely and ahead of time to try to provide parents with that education and information around body safety, online safety, and what to do that should there be a concern, should there be a question that comes up, or even a disclosure about something having happened, for parents to know what to do and to do that in an effective way. And those protective factors are also tremendously important, that should something happen to a child, should they be a victim of abuse or other adverse childhood experience, it's those same protective factors that are going to help with that resiliency, with that healing process after the fact. And so at Children's Cove, we work collaboratively to provide this prevention education, but we also provide the coordinated response to cases involving crimes against children. So specifically child sexual abuse, severe physical abuse, witness to domestic violence, and commercial sexual exploitation of children. And this includes online sexual exploitation of children, which is something that is happening at a alarmingly increasing rate in our community here. And so we come together to come out and provide this information and really guide parents in how to have some of those talks, whether your children are very young, 3, 4, 5, or a little younger or a little older, or starting to transition into those older tween years, or even as teenagers and high school students, because this conversation is not a one-time thing. It's a conversation, as we say, have it early, have it often, let the conversation continue, and let the conversation grow. Oftentimes when parents, we raise our children, we often have a lot of kind of role models and examples of safety conversations perhaps that we received when we were children, right? About fire safety, water safety and looking both ways before you cross the street. But there never was really a guide for how do you talk to your children about body safety? How do you talk to your children about the private parts of their body and why they're private and what to do with those things if something happens where somebody asks to see those things or touch those things, those parts of the body. We don't have any role models for that. And so that's something that we like to engage and have conversations with parents. And here's how you talk to your kids about that. So.
And as Jacob said, we really support families. It's not unusual for me to get a call from a parent or caregiver that is really dysregulated because something's happened and they just don't even know where to begin. And very often the first response is, you already did such a big thing, you reached out to one of us to get some support and help through this. And I think that that's a critical part of knowing in these challenging times is that we have created a community. We have a really wonderful place happening here on Cape Cod of supporting families and having those conversations and being that person that can just listen. And I can say, hey, I've got a great friend, Jacob, and I'm gonna call him and I'm gonna let him know you're coming and what that's gonna look like, and really being what I would call a place. And one of the things that we do so much reading in our work and so much, and one of the things is Jack Scheinkoff, who comes out of Harvard in the School for Child Development, he said that every child, that what we should be really working on is creating what he called the SSNR, safe, stable, and nurturing relationships. And so that's really what our goal is when we're working with families, is helping that first person, that parent and that caregiver, to be that for their child. I know that as a mom, as my children are now older, but I can remember those teenage years, and I can remember some of those really challenging moments. Much of it was about friendship, relationships, and things like that, and really having to sit in discomfort for me as a mom was part of the real challenge for me, to let them be really vulnerable in that moment. And I gotta tell you, my heart was jumping out of my chest of how do I stay calm when this feels so uncalm, if that's such a way of phrasing it. But that's what we get to do for families, and not only connect them here, but we have amazing school systems that care deeply about children and their wellness. So very often these conversations start right here.
Yeah. So I guess before we continue with monologuing on, there are a few people who joined us. Does anybody have any specific questions you'd like us to address this evening before we jump into anything? No? Alrighty. So speaking of uncomfortable conversations, because I think that that's a misnomer that so many parents have. I remember the day I became a father, I realized I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and that continues to this very day. I feel very confident and feel very good, but there's definitely a lot of times where I feel I have no idea what I'm doing and how do I handle this, and man, I wish I did this different, or man, I feel like I nailed that, but maybe I didn't. And I think that there's a lot of times as parents we wish we had do-overs, and then I think there's many times we could also say, well, you know what, I can do better with that next time. But then there's those conversations that are really difficult, and like Cindy was saying, is they get your heart going, you get a little scared because you haven't had that conversation, you haven't practiced that conversation, because even if you've had a similar conversation with a friend, a peer at some point in your life, you're in a different role. You're a parent, you're a caregiver, you're somebody with the responsibility of that growth and development of someone. And it can feel terrifying. And one of the things I always try to make sure I'm telling myself and telling others is that it's okay. I have good answers, I have good information. And what I also know is that my kids have no information. And so if I screw it up, there's at least something that's there. And they don't know that I screwed it up. Or if I get asked a question and I don't know the answer to that question, I can say, geez, that's a really great question. Thank you so much for asking that. Can I come back to you a little bit later on that? Because I really want to think about it and make sure I'm giving you an answer I feel comfortable with. And I'm going to tell you, the vast majority of the time, kids say, okay, And coming back and addressing that question is going to be a really important part of that. So whether it's something with very young kids, talking about challenging topics like life and death and, faith and body safety and those kinds of things, if you're not ready, willing, or not ready or able to address that conversation in that moment, it's okay to hit the pause on that and find a time and find a way to get into that conversation. But something that's so critically important is that you do engage in that conversation and that you take your best shot at it. When it comes to things like body safety, and I keep saying that term, but I'm going to really define that a little bit more. Body safety is not about sex. It's not about the birds and the bees. It's not about any of those kinds of things. It's exactly what it means. It's about how does one keep one's body safe, right? And so that starts at a very basic level of being able to identify and understand what are the different parts of one's body, right? And so I think that at a certain point we do head, shoulders, knees, and toes with children, and we can identify what's a head and what's shoulders and what's knees and what's an elbow. But then when we talk about the private parts of our body, right, there's so many different words for that. And I think that as a starting point of body safety is having that one word, which is the actual definition of that word. It's a penis, it's a vagina, it's a vulva, it's an anus, it's what are those, it's the breasts, it's what those parts actually are called. And that can sound very terrifying because we often don't address those parts of the body by their actual terms. And even when we were young children, it was never done. It was called a dinky or a flower or a something, right? Everything had a kind of a cutesy name, not ready to address it. But we need to actually call those parts of the body with what they are. And that's a conversation that can start right away, right? It can start even as a parent talking to a baby, to an infant, to a 1-year-old, to a 2-year-old, and calling those parts of the body what they are. And it desensitizes us as parents, it desensitizes you as a parent from being that terrified part of it and talking about it more conversationally. And then as those questions evolve and as those conversations grow, so does your language, so does your definition of it. I think that for parents of younger children, there's a huge grace period because kids forget everything you talk about with them, like almost right away. And then every year there's like a reset at 2, 3, 4, 5, they don't remember. So you get to practice that conversation over and over again. And every time you have it, it becomes more comfortable. And you're intertwining that with other safety conversations as they happen, right? That's another element I think that we want to make sure that we're addressing is when we're talking about things like body safety, is that it doesn't need to be we need to sit down and have a conversation about something, right? It's a happenstance conversation that happens at an appropriate time. Giving a child a bath. Hey, as I'm cleaning you, I just want to make sure you know, like, I'm cleaning you and giving you a bath because I'm your parent, and I need to make sure that you're clean. That's part of my responsibility. Or if you're bringing someone to go swimming, helping a child with their bathing suit. Hey, did you know the parts of your body that are covered by a bathing suit are private, and nobody should be touching those or asking to touch those, and nobody should be asking you to look at or touch their private parts of their body. It's a 15 to 20 second conversation that leaves an imprint. It's planting a seed, talking about safety, right? And then those conversations will grow as time goes on because as children age and as they get older, their conversations and questions become more complicated. And that supportive, nurturing conversation and relationship, and by demonstrating that, allows those types of conversations to grow.
Yeah, I always come back to, and I think the foundation that is critical for family wellness is the dinner table, the place where conversations happen. And when that is the norm within a family, it really becomes home base. It comes to be that place where when something's going on, I know where to go for the answers. And it's such a critical part of that healthy human being developing. And as Jacob is giving us sort of that foundation that we lay when our children are really young and we're really starting to plant those seeds. Again, my favorite line is, that's such a great question, I'm glad you asked it. Then I turn around and, but in that moment, I'm really letting them know I heard them. As they mature, I'm a firm believer that we need to teach an incredible level of responsibility with our young people around technology and screen time. But I think we can also use it to our advantage. I think there's many teachable moments that happen every single day in our communities that we can use as a moment to not only talk about safety and relationships, but talk about what is unsafe in relationships and things like that. I remember when my children were young, and I'm sure that my parents felt this way about the Beatles, but all of a sudden I was listening to rap, and it was like, oh, my brain wanted to blow up, but it became a great opportunity for conversation around the way that we talk about women, the way that we talk about our LGBT communities. So I was able to not say we're not listening to that. I was able to say, let's talk. I want to hear what you think they're saying and what I'm hearing them say, and where is that on our moral compass as how we believe or think about things.
Yeah, and that's such a critical component of today's culture and society. I think in the past couple of years we've lost ourselves in internet-enabled devices, whether that's cell phones, computers, Chromebooks, video game systems, whatever that may be. We had 2 years where that was life. It was already kind of a challenge to understand, where did the internet begin and where was real life beginning, and now there's been a complete merge of those two, and we have to start recognizing that this is a regular, everyday, ongoing part of our lives. Gone is the time where we could say, oh, well, you know what, you're on consequence or you're in trouble, so you lose these things, because they are so integrated into our lives. The change in conversation should really be, tell me about what you're doing online. Tell me what apps you're interested in. What's the latest trend on TikTok right now? Show me a video that you really liked. Show me something that maybe kind of made you feel a little upset when you saw it. Being able to engage in a child, a teen's, a young adult's online life is just as important as being involved with, tell me about your friends, tell me about your sports, what clubs are you involved in, what play is taking place at school. That integration into the online world, as parents, we have that responsibility now to really start to see what those things are and engage with it and show interest without judgment. Because just like there may be a situation that happens at a party, somebody drinking too much, or maybe there's something that happens that goes a little too far, right? We want kids and teens to feel comfortable coming to us and saying, hey, this really messed up thing happened at this party, at this thing that happened at school, at this dance. We also need kids to know that they can come to us, hey, this really messed up thing happened online, because messed up things are happening online. And there's a huge fear that younger kids, 12, 13, 14, and older, is that if they come forward with information about that messed up thing that happened online, that they're going to lose that social connection. They're going to lose that connectivity. And that's a very real thing. That's like losing your car keys back in the day, right? It's like losing your phone privilege. It's those things. And so if we need to be able to adjust and adapt and become involved in that in a way which is not intrusive, but allowing us to be invited in, showing genuine interest and compassion and non-judgment.
And I do think that as parents and caregivers, most of the young people that I know that have access to phones and computers and all of those things, most of them are not gainfully employed, which means that parents are often paying for that. And so I always use the messaging that says this is a privilege, not a right, and with every privilege comes responsibility. And I really think that it often can feel very unpopular as a parent or caregiver to really be modeling and teaching about responsibility, because the other families aren't maybe on that same page. And sometimes being a parent sometimes means that you have to stand alone when you're thinking about what is it that I want to teach my child. And I believe that we really need to make it popular to teach true responsibility around technology and really have deeper conversations about what is cruel and what is really hurting another human being. And we do so much. We do a lot of talking in our schools around bullying and things like that. And I've done a lot with the district attorney's office over the years on this conversation. And what we know is the bullying rates have gone up so high because kids that would never have done anything like this are now tempted and are in the virtual world of being hurtful, of being cruel, of doing those things. And You know, we have truly a responsibility to be teaching civility around technology. So with it comes safety. And it's not about judgment, because it's kind of like, don't touch the wet paint, so we're going to touch it. The technology's there, so they're going to try it. And so we have to recognize that these are not bad kids that get into trouble here. It's just a big rabbit hole that they get caught down.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, being able to have those as a part of conversations around, you know, what are your family values? What are the things that matter to you as a family, right? Not just your expectations of behavior as a parent, but what are the things that matter to you? Is trust? Is honesty? Is being able to have fun? Is that a value? Is that seeking support and help? Is it how you treat others? Being able to develop those rules as a family, that brings that more into focus. Is the more conversations you have about your familial culture, it's going to reflect itself everywhere that a child is, and that includes online. At Children's Cove, we have on our website, childrenscove.org, we have a tool that we offer for parents, for kids, for teens. It's called The Pledge, and it's about reducing instances of online sexual exploitation, because, as I mentioned earlier, those cases are tremendously on the rise. You know, and we have seen, unfortunately, a lot of cases with peer-to-peer relationships that were once one thing and then they became something else, and then that has led to negative outcomes. But really, it's talking about how to reduce those instances of situations happening online. And so we have agreements for both the parent and for the child and for the teen. And those are a template. It doesn't have to be exactly like that, but it can be used as a starting point for a conversation. What do you think about this? Does this sound fair to you? Is this not fair to you? Or can we agree to all of these things and then maybe add a few more? What makes sense for us as a family and within our family culture? So that's something that we offer as a resource for everyone here.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Because I feel like we're all in the midst of this, and I think it's important that we hear from each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is it the name of the program, Pledge?
So on our website, so childrenscove.org, it's kind of buried in there, but it's in the parent section under online safety. There's a spot that you can go, and it's just about taking the pledge. You know, I pledge to have a conversation, talk about online safety with my children, and have that as a conversation with family.
And I think what's really important in what you're doing in that process is reminding all of us that our name matters. When we sign our name, when we make a commitment, it should have value and it should matter. And the pledge is a great teaching moment of, in our family, what we value and what's our moral compass and what we believe in. You know, I don't want to say I'm on the other side of this, but my children are now adults, and I look back and the lessons, and I was like the crazy mom. A lot of it trying to keep them safe, to the point that I went to Vermont and bought 10 acres of land that will never get electricity, because that's how I was going to keep them safe from technology. And I was the only one that went. So
I'll go with you.
Okay.
We'll head up there.
But I realized quickly it wasn't the answer. I needed to teach them how to live in a world with that kind of access and be safe and remember that. And now I watch them to keep their social media private and to do that, to just for their own wellness and different ways of doing it. And so I never fault a parent that kind of their family gets into trouble here, because the harsh reality is technology is moving so quick that we as adults can't keep up with it, but our children are mastering it. But what they don't have is the maturity to handle the places that they'll go. And so it's like the perfect storm for where something can happen. And what we know now is once it's out there, it's forever. It's our footprint, and it's going to find itself always. And so really teaching our children about reputation and value of your name and things like that is an incredibly important part of our job.
Absolutely. There's an organization that we partner with as well, the Institute for Responsible Online and Cell Phone Communication. Richard Geary is the co-founder of that and does a lot of work. And he talks a lot about, your digital legacy. We have a pretty much unlimited access of who are you. You Google your name and there's going to be information out there about you whether you want it there or not. And no matter what you do, you wouldn't be able to remove all of it. And so being able to have conversations with kids at that age to say, you have to remember that this may be a moment that, mistakes are made or, positive choices are made. But what the choices you do make and what goes online, that's going to be a part of your digital legacy. And so think about, what do you want your friends to see? What do you want your parents to see? What do you want future colleges to see? Employers, your grandchildren, potential people you want to date. What else is out there that may take a look at that? And I think that I know every day I'm still kind of baffled about the information that we can find and that we can engage with and how quickly it's growing. I can't even imagine what's going to be here a year from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now when my daughters are in high school. I'm terrified of that. But we're going to have those conversations and I have to be involved and engage with that and do the best that I can to adjust with it and not be too buried.
And I
Can
think
you talk a little bit about just your thoughts on developmentally, kind of what's the kind of timeline thinking for kids and what they should be or can access at certain developmental stages?
I think that's a great question, and I think that we have to first recognize that our educational systems are now utilizing technology, and I think that that's a really wonderful point of entry for children to be able to engage. I get really anxious with those babies that are being put in front of screen time. We know developmentally that brain and what's happening there from that input. When we look at language development, we can see the difference between a child that has had the serve and return with a parent or caregiver in contrast to a child that's been spending a lot of time in front of a screen. The serve and return is the critical part of language development, and if it's not happening, I believe that children need to, as they mature, if they're not able to take care of their stuff, meaning did they get to school and forget their sneakers for gym, and that's a pattern, we're working on building responsibility and personal responsibility and independence. There's an indicator like, are they ready for an $800 phone to be carrying it around with them? And I can remember talking to a principal of another school district, and she opened up the drawer and she said, these are all the smartphones that I've taken from the first graders. And, because they didn't know, they were basically taking pictures of people and where it was going from there. But the stages of what children can access, again, I see the little people, I think we're a very short time away before we're being born with another set of thumbs to manage. And so developmentally, we have to remember going back to the basics of fine motor development, gross motor development, oral development, language development, sensory development, because even though it's impacting our educational system, children still need to know how to write. They still need to know how to use scissors. And when they don't have any tone in their hands, then we start to see disruptive behaviors because they're using avoidance because I want my tablet, I want this. So I'm not answering your question completely other than maturity is an important thing. And as children show the ability to be responsible for things, the same, we wouldn't buy, a puppy to be raised by a 3-year-old, but we know at a certain level that children are going to be able to care for something like that. But the reality is, even at high school level, they still don't have the capacity to not have that impulsivity that's going to take them down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge when we're talking about development is we're talking about so many things, and I'm not a child development expert, I defer to Cindy on that, but the elements related to safety of this are critical. If you give a child of any age an internet-enabled device, you are giving them the keys to the kingdom. And unless you know every facet of that device, and you know what can be accessed and what cannot, unless you know with 100% certainty, you cannot assure that that is a safe device. I had mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, we respond to cases when children are victimized, in person or online. I just had a conversation, we're publishing a report tomorrow on the regional impact of sexual exploitation of children in the region. And between Plymouth County, Bristol County, and Cape and Islands, we've seen children as young as 5 being victimized online with sexual exploitation. We've seen children 6, 7, 8, 9. They're finding their way into spaces online, even through gaming programs, through apps, or things like Roblox, Minecraft, getting pulled into external areas, Discord servers, and then being sexually exploited, being asked for photos, being asked for information, being provided with information, and images and videos and everything like that. And so, when children are getting this stuff from a developmental perspective, do they have the full understanding of everything that is out there, right? And if you haven't had all of those conversations yet about the darker side of what could be online, that's a concern. That's a significant concern. And so from a safety perspective, as a value system within your home, you have to say, what am I willing to give my children that are dangerous, right? What am I willing to allow them to do? Do you let your children go get something in the grocery store in a grocery aisle? I did that for the first time like 2 days ago. That's why I'm using that as an example. I was terrified the entire time. And I could see them the whole time. But I was giving them that trust, and I was taking that risk with them doing that, and I watched them the whole time, and they came back, they got the can of black olives, it was fine. But there was a level of risk associated with that. There's a level of risk associated with internet-enabled devices and technology, and we have to acknowledge that. We've been kind of the test dummies for this new generation of mobile technology and internet-enabled devices, and even as those kind of on the older end of growing up with it, there's definitely pitfalls to that. So we have to remember really being involved in understanding what those systems are before you give that technology over.
There's a lot of things, and I use the word handicap because I believe technology has handicapped us in many ways. But one of the ways in our culture today is the capacity to understand how important delayed gratification is, and for children to learn how to wait and to take a pause. We have adults, that our issues with our debt, national debt, we can blame it on all kinds of people, but the reality is it's because we spend when we don't have, and it's part of the norm. And so learning how to really delay gratification is a really critical life skill. When I talk about we have the privilege of being with families in those earliest years, and I talk about how critical it is to allow our children to be disappointed, to not get what they always want, and to have to wait and be patient. I have 5 kids in 6 years, and there's many things. They would all go back and say, mother of ours was crazy, but I can tell you what they all learned was how to wait. And that was the biggest skill I was able to develop, because there was always somebody that had another need. And so when we understand allowing the world to kind of determine what our children are going to be, we have a responsibility to have a voice in that and not allow that. And I remember I would say to my kids, they used to say, we're the only ones in the whole school now. And we didn't have game systems, and because I knew that wasn't going to work well in a house with one TV, and they didn't get those phones. But again, my children are older, but I needed to be unpopular, is what I'm saying. And being a parent is not a popularity contest. You're going to be unpopular with your children and your peers. But I think if you keep as your sort of your moral compass of what your value systems are, that's the critical part of what our children need. And so, anyhow, did we answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
There was an article in this morning's Cape Cod
Yes,
Times.
yes.
You saw it, so it seems to really treat it. And I never read, we get the Cape Cod Times, I never read it. I don't know why I opened it this morning. And I raised my children, I'm at that age where my kids came in before social media, so I was fascinated by the article. But
That's the only good thing that's come out of that paper.
We'll see. But it spoke to, a number of the things that you were sharing about this idea of, setting up some rules, setting up some guidance, doing it actually before you buy the device with so many things. Kind of like we set up dating rules before our kids start dating. We set up driving rules when they're younger so they anticipate. But I thought the article talked about the maturity that you that was the guide, was if they can't handle, if they're losing things, they can't handle simple responsibilities, they're not ready for the device. And I like the guideline they had about the 2 Ps, private, public and productive. With the idea that devices are always out in public and not behind closed doors in the bedroom where you have no idea. And productive, that we use any of our devices for productive purposes and not just general or entertainment. And the dangers of the scrolling, like scrolling through YouTube, I kind of caught me because I'm on Facebook and I get the news, and once I click into that, I'm scrolling. Whether I care or not, it's I can feel the addiction that that I've had.
And that's it hits
There's so many points that to the question in that one article this
It
morning.
really, it's something you want to post on your page. It was really well done. And I'm extremely, on a news feed, thrilled to hear about Seattle, Washington, actually creating a lawsuit against social media and what it's doing to our children. And it was encouraging to hear that. And hopefully it's a trend of where they're going with it. Yes. Yes.
Don't you think that it will be helpful to do some kind of subject at school about safety online?
Yeah, we'd
Where
love to.
teachers will be teaching safety protocols for online.
The more
Don't you think that current life, we already, as you said, in 1 year it will be even worse. In 5 years, we don't know what will be.
I'm going to let Melissa go with this one.
So just for here in Monomoy, at the elementary level, middle, and high, so we have what's called digital citizenship. So that is taught at all levels, and a new course that's going into the program of studies at the high school is specific to media, for safety in media. But we do what's called digital citizenship. So that is taught at all levels. So you're absolutely right. It does need to be. And I think, and I was having a conversation earlier, what's really important to think about technology is we have an environment that's a little bit more secure with our students here than when they walk out the door. So we have a system, it's called Securely. So if a student is, on their device, and they're supposed to be because that's the learning that's happening, but they wander off a little bit and they go to a website that is not safe, we're immediately alerted. Like that. It automatically pops up to the administration so that we can kind of check into, that wasn't a safe place. Let's kind of talk about, why you decided to search for X, Y, and Z. So we have that ability here, and we have the ability to truly monitor students because the teacher has all the kids' computers, what they're on, they can see. And so when they leave here and go home, though, that's not necessarily the case either. There are some, and maybe you can speak to it, there are some definitely systems that people can put through their own network on their systems, but I think it's hard. It's hard unless you're having those conversations and talking with your kids about what's safe and not safe, so.
Yeah. You
I
can't.
mean, we've had this conversation. I did explain to our children about safety, about that nobody can see your private parts or touch or whatever, as you had said about that. We've been discussed this, all of this, and they know that they cannot send any pictures to anyone, share it, or, all of that. But that's a good point. How can I, as a mother, keep online browsing of what my children do and be alerted about it?
So where's
For
Joy?
example, I'm at work.
I can touch your
And I
house.
want to know what my child is doing at home without my supervision because I'm working. He's working too probably, so how I can be alerted? Maybe I will just shut down the Wi-Fi.
So there are different apps and programs that are out there that parents can use, that you can put onto, cell phone system, computer systems, everything like that. There are different ones. There's none that we really specifically recommend. We have a few links of those on our website under parent resources that are recommended by organizations that work specifically around this. So that's a part of a system, right? It's a part of safety. There's no one tool or technology that's going to allow 100% safety and security, because here's the thing is, hey, my mom put this thing on my phone now, so can I borrow your phone? Right? And then it's as soon as there are systems that are designed to prevent something, there's already something being developed to circumnavigate it. And so that's where those organizations, those conversations, having that, being involved in somebody's online life and showing that you're interested, that is an important part of it. And saying, hey, maybe as you're first getting this device, this is part of what the expectation is I'm going to see what you're doing, and here's the parental controls, because I need to know that I can trust you with this. And this is what it's going to be. That is an element of a conversation you can have as a parent. That's your choice around that. But then knowing that, hey, if you make a mistake, even if I don't know about it, if I don't see it, I still need you to come to me. That's a conversation I have with my kids all the time is, I'm going to be more upset if you don't come to me about a situation because you're not telling me the truth than I am over you coming to me, and no matter what it is. I always want to know. I will never be angry about that.
If I can interject just for one
Yes, please
second,
do.
I wanted to follow up on your request for kind of specific tools to use, and I would echo what Jacob says, that there are a bunch out there. There are some built into Apple devices, there are some that you can purchase, there are some free ones, but in every case, the kids will probably find a way around them. So they can be helpful as part of the sort of suite of tools that you're using, but one of my favorite articles from a few years ago, I think it was on Common Sense Media, the headline was, "Why the Best Parental Control is You." And it really emphasizes that point, that it's those conversations, it's that kind of constant communication that helps. And one of the things we personally did, I have 4 teenagers, is the agreement to them getting a device was, your parents know all your passwords. Anytime one of us says, hand it over, we look at it. While we're building that trust and they're learning how to use it, we were free to take their phone at any time, look at their search history, look at their text messages, look at what they're sending, look at what they're doing. And that eventually decreases as they got older and showed us that they could be trusted. But, reliance on a single technological tool, as Jacob said, just isn't ever going to quite be enough, because they'll always find ways around it or ways to turn it off or borrow somebody else's device, or so it's a little risky, in my opinion, to kind of rely solely on that to protect everybody.
That's a really, and it is. And I think the other thing is about really establishing really good habits. In this article today, it talked about having a sort of a platform where everybody puts their phones. Technology should not be in the bedroom. It should not even in the grown-up's bedroom, the parent's bedroom. Really modeling what it is you want your children to do with technology. But I interrupted you. You had a question.
I wanted to ask about how to speak with them. No, I forgot the question. Parent control. Okay, sorry. Let's
That's
come
all right.
back later. I just forgot.
Well, I think that you've introduced a really important part. How do you have these conversations about technology?
Oh, that's what I wanted to say, that our children are debating already about their privacy. So when I ask about, give me the phone that I want to check, what are you doing online? They debate about their privacy. And they tell me about that they've been taught at school that it's their privacy, and they cannot give me that.
So
Yeah, so
Cindy
I
said
was surprised, and I'm saying that unless I'm still a caregiver,
Cindy said
I'm
it.
responsible for this.
Ask them how their credit card's going.
Ask them are they paying the bill? Did they pay for the
I
device?
did tell that I'm paying your bills for these phones, and actually I bought this phone for you
Yeah,
to make sure that you're safe when I'm not around. When, for example, I'm at work, I can call you, I can FaceTime you, I can see you.
You know,
well,
believe
I
it or
will tell
not,
you though.
Yeah.
if
they
one-
still make flip phones too.
Yeah, with one particular child, he just went AWOL on me, and I was a little nervous, and I kept calling, and then I sent this message: I'm assuming your phone has been lost or stolen, so I am now having it turned off. Ring! My phone was blowing up. I think that, and I would do that. And so, this is part of the privilege. It comes back to privilege with responsibility. It is not a right. You have a right to use the bathroom by yourself. You have a right to take a shower without an audience. You have a right to write in your journal. But when it comes to technology, that's my responsibility as your parent, to make sure that you're safe. And so that's how we're going to do this together.
And I can assure you that is not what's being taught in schools. I can assure you of
They're
that.
really smart about privacy now.
I can assure you that's not something that any of our teachers tell students, that their phones are private. I would venture to guess that many of them say, who bought it? And, that your parent probably has a right to take it away from you. So I think it's really important when you're hearing information that doesn't sound right, call the school, call your principal, and say, I just want to run this by you because, Susie came home, I don't know your children's name, but came home and said, I'm told, that the phone is private, and so that you can have that conversation with school. Keep that line of communication open with the school, especially if your children are coming home and telling you something that you want to check in and tell them, let's call Mrs. Smith or whomever, and let's ask that question because we want to make sure we understand.
Another trick, they changed this passcode which you can do.
Got a couple feisty ones at home, huh?
And how? And when I did find out that, I'm like, excuse me, what's the passcode here? You don't have to know it. No, I have to know it in case something happens. You cannot change it.
Yeah.
You cannot.
Well, I think what Jacob just said too, they still sell flip phones. And so, the smartphone, they're walking with their technology all day long. And I would still have my flip phone, and my job made me get the other phone, but I was very happy.
I'm thinking of downgrading to get rid of. I want to go back to a flip phone.
I think that, as I'm watching the clock here, this is such an important conversation, and I think that we will come back as often as we want, but there's so many great ways that we can continue to have this conversation. I think most important for me is that I want families to know that there's some really hard things that happen, there's scary things that happen, but you're not alone. And you've got a school system that is committed to you, but you have organizations like what Jacob and I get to do,
Absolutely.
and that is really be there for families. And so in those scary moments, it's a strength to reach out and ask for help, is what I would say.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other last questions before?
Just a comment. Was there someone else? No, just a comment that, I just think what you're doing is so important in terms of, as experts in the field, giving that reinforcement to parents to be parents, that your kids right now don't need a pal. They've got enough of those somewhere else. They need a parent. Our job is to get our kids ready to live without us. And, that's a big responsibility. But because my kids and their cohort just always love to use that. Everybody else is, and somebody else's house, this wouldn't happen or whatever.
They had the cooler parents.
Yeah,
and the better
we would
food.
just say, well, this is so great. Why don't you go live there? In fact, let's go upstairs and pack your bag right now. I'll call Mom and we'll arrange everything. But just to get the strength from someone with expertise to say, it's okay to be firm, to have rules, set your expectations. I once heard someone say that the biggest mistake parents, especially in adolescents and young adults, make is we don't express our own values, and what happens then is our kids think that we go along with whatever they're saying. They say something that might shock us, and we don't come back and tell them where we stand, and yet we're such important people in their life, and they get the opposite message because we're afraid to set some rules, set some guidelines, hold the line.
Be unpopular.
Yeah, I'll just tell you a quick story before I end, because my kids didn't care for me for quite some time. When they first got their phones in high school, not till high school, they were required to FaceTime me whenever they got to their friend's house or whenever they got to where they said. And it was interesting because it was horrific the first few times, and then all of a sudden their friends would be in the background waving, and it became an okay thing because it was expected, and it was just like, yep, I know I need to FaceTime, so I better be where I'm supposed to be. And it worked really well. That was a simple agreement that we had with the kids, and the same with the passcodes. And if I couldn't get into one of their apps or anything, the phone was gone until we sat back down and said, here are the rules for having this, or else you can't have it.
That's what I did too.
Yeah. And that's good.
No phone if there is no passcode.
Yeah.
And that's good. What we tell kids here, when kids have to put their phones in the pockets or the bins or wherever when they can't have their phones, is your parents know where you are. You're here. We can always get a hold of your parents. Nothing's going to happen, but you need your phone here all day long. So, reminding them of that as well, that if something, because they panic without it, so you have to remind them, you're safe here. There are people here that can call your parents, and your parents can call us. And we always encourage parents, and I should have asked this earlier, please don't text your children during school. Please don't call. Please don't answer a text, so that we can really reinforce that that's not okay. That if you need to get a hold of each other, we have people here you can go to and ask to call. So hopefully we can continue that message with parents.
We got one last question.
In terms of the different discussions on body safety to be having at different developmental stages, do you have any guidance on where parents can go to, like as you mentioned, maybe not their own experiences, but kind of where to go to get a little coaching to be ready to have those conversations with their own kids?
Yeah, so we can also, Cindy and I can run another group just specifically around that. So we're happy to do that. On our website, under parent resources, we actually have a list of books, which they don't dive directly into those specific topics. Some of them do, but others are really about practicing difficult conversations, right? Let's say you have a child that's a little older, 6, 7, 8, it's more conversational as opposed to just teaching, is how do you engage in conversations about difficult things? How do you develop a rapport around that? To really have that back and forth. But then if there's any other specific questions, I'm available anytime. You can call, email. We can run parent groups specifically around those types of conversations and discussions for different age groups, giving specific examples for different ages. So there's a number of resources.
And there's definitely, I have resources that show the sort of the developmental stages of the sexual development of children through each, what is curiosity and what is, and where they should be at. But I'll tell you that my favorite book when my kids were growing up was called It's Perfectly Normal. And it was really well done, and it was just such an opportunity for conversation. And I'll probably just close with this, but in the elementary school that my children went to, the health curriculum, they always did a series, and parents could sign saying, I want my children to see the film or not. And parents could go, and I would go every time. The film didn't change, the science was still the same, but I wanted each of them to know how important this was, and it was one of my sons. And I had an opportunity, which I call those moments, and it was he and I in the car, and I said, hey, you had that movie the other day in health, how was it? He goes, it's very interesting, Mom, it was very interesting. And I said, really, I said, if you have any questions, Dad and I are right there to answer them, we're right there for you. He goes, actually, I do have one question. And I said, well, what is that? He goes, this thing called wet dreams, ejaculations, he said. When does that start to happen? And I'm thinking, God, he's pretty mature physically. So I said, If I remember correctly, I think your father told me that it happened for him when he was in the 4th grade. So that's the age of my son at this point. So I drive home, keep my composure, and I get my husband, I get him in, said, as far as you're concerned, your first wet dream was in the 4th grade. And so to normalize
Yeah.
what was happening and to make sure that those conversations could happen. So you might want to edit that from the film, but anyhow.
I'd highlight it, I'd start with that,
Yes.
actually.
So, but we can come back and provide all kinds of resources.
Absolutely.
So,
I think just another topic is really how do you talk to your children about feeling safe telling?
Yeah.
That to me is,
Yeah.
sometimes where there's a struggle, you might have the conversation about, what's safe and somebody shouldn't, but what happens when somebody does, and how do we teach our children to communicate that and feel safe to do that?
I believe we start to build that from the very beginning when we're changing their diaper and we're using the real words. If we open up a diaper and we go, oh, that gives a message right there that something down there is not okay to talk about.
Right.
And so it's really about how we continuously, this is a journey of these conversations, not waiting until something has happened, but, and sometimes we can be uncomfortable, and I think it's really valuable for us to say, wow, I'm having a funny feeling in my stomach, but I really want to talk about this.
Yes, and creating opportunities for those moments, car conversations
Yeah.
are really good ones, and kind of that one-on-one time to just talk about anything without judgment and without fear, and being supportive and being safe and being nurturing, and saying, tell me what's going on in your life. Tell me something that really matters to you right now. Tell me something that you wish was a little bit different. Being, open to uncomfortable conversations. I think we often, when we ask somebody, hey, did you have a good day? We're not leaving an opportunity for, no, I had a really bad day today. Tell me about your day. Tell me something that's going on in your life, and allowing there to be some scary moments in that, and managing it to the best that you can. And waiting for your own private moment to say, oh my God, how the heck did I do that?
Just quick, I know you're closing. What else is helpful when they ask to get an update for some kind of game or app? There are new rules or instructions. How would you say?
I think the rating systems are really important to pay attention
so
to.
What I do, I give them to read this, because sometimes they do read right in this game and the rules that there are no bullying or something else.
Mhm.
So I just give them to read.
Yeah, I think it comes back to what do you know about that program? What do you know about that app? What do you know about that game? And who has access to them? Because you have to feel comfortable as a parent with what your child has access to and who has access to your child, and if they know how to respond to people requesting information or talking to them online. Anytime where there's a chat feature, a function where other people, outside people, can communicate, there's an additional level of risk. So you being involved and looking at it and saying, how do you feel about it? That's an important part of all of that. Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
To be
you.
continued. Thank you all very much.